Let me bring on my guest. This man was a running back at the University of Oregon, a two-time All-American while he sported the Ducks uniform, played 11 years in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers, New York Giants, was a Pro Bowler, and now is a host on the Believe Podcast Network, the Carolina Panthers podcast. Mr. Jonathan Stewart. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. Nice to formally meet you.
Absolutely.
I'm not quite sure if did you tackle me at some point in 2011?
I'm sure I tried. Now, whether I was successful or not, I don't know. We'd have to watch the tape, I guess. You were a hard
Well,
guy to bring down and catch. I know that for sure.
you were definitely. I mean, I looked at the stats, and you had a 1.5 sacks against us, 2011, and and that's not an easy task because as I remember, there was one run that Cam had a zigzag
I remember.
run. And it was his rookie year, I think, right? Had to be
I
his rookie year.
It might have been rookie, either rookie or second year.
Yeah, but yeah, he was zigzagging across the field, and so it was a hard task. It was definitely a hard task to sack that guy in the backfield.
Dude, it's crazy that you remember that because as soon as you said Carolina Panthers 2011, I knew the game you were talking about. I
Yeah,
actually stayed up and watched Stanford and USC play late the night before, so I was a little tired going into that game. I was like, "Oh, man, how am
yeah,
I gonna play?" I remember a couple things about that day. I remember Cam Newton is the biggest quarterback I've ever seen in my life, okay? Him and Ben Roethlisberger, but he
yeah,
looked bigger to me, and that stupid run, and when you're on the other side of the ball, you say the word "stupid" instead of "zigzag" 'cause,
yeah.
oh my I was so exhausted, and then he ended up scoring a touchdown, and it was a phenomenal play by a phenomenal athlete. I remember that all too well.
Yeah, man. But kudos to you, man, on your career. Um, you're a baller at Nebraska. Uh, as I was, doing just my background. Marlon Lucky,
Mhm.
what
Yep,
Ndamukong Suh.
yep.
Um, just guys that I remember from the U.S. All-American Army Bowl,
Mhm.
and great guys. And Ndamukong, everybody knows his success. Um, but I never really found like what was Marlon Lucky like in college. I remember practicing with him, and just seemed like a good guy. I know did he get injured while he was at college, or what happened?
He was a good dude. He was a real nice dude. Now, my experience with him, he was either 2 or 3 years younger than me. So younger guys, as you know, they tend to be a little bit more quiet until they become an upperclassman. During my time with him, he was a nice dude, quiet. I think I don't remember if he got hurt or not. That doesn't sound familiar to me, but I was so
Yeah,
busy my first 2, 3 years in the league with my head spinning while he was in Nebraska, maybe he did. My
yeah,
experience with him was he seemed like he was trying to find his stride and trying to
I got you.
because he had all the athletic ability in the world, just trying to find that physical side of running the ball. So that was my limited experience with him at Nebraska, and then Sue was a young guy as well. He was a freaking monster. Okay, he was already one of the strongest guys in the weight room as a freshman. When you did one-on-one Oklahoma drill, nobody on the offensive side wanted to go against him, so you could kinda
Yeah,
see what was coming with Sue.
yeah. At the All-American game, they told him to play offensive line, and he hated it. And I remember, obviously I don't remember exactly word for word, but he
Yeah,
was pissed and did not want any parts of playing offensive line, and he made people pay in practice. Like the
dude.
little stinted practices that we had, he made his presence made felt. So, um, but man, Nebraska, the Big Ten, um, it's all new to me. So it's great to be on this show because you're an expert on the Big Ten.
So, as a former Oregon running back, proud alum, you mentioned it, all right, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, coming to join the Big Ten. Now, there's 18 teams. The Big Ten is all the way from Eugene to LA to Lincoln to Piscataway, New Jersey. Okay, and we can chat more in depth about this, and I look forward to it. But just your initial thoughts when you think about going to Wisconsin maybe in November, and I got the schedule in front of me, but just playing some of these Big Ten teams during the season, them coming out to Eugene. By the way, Eugene was actually, of all my recruiting visits that I took, I actually grew up in southeastern Washington. Okay.
Okay.
So that was actually my favorite recruiting visit of all the visits that I took. Don't tell people in Lincoln that. But I really enjoyed that recruiting visit. Okay. And I watched them
Right.
play Wisconsin in the offseason. That was when Joey Harrington scored the late TD quarterback sneak, and they ended up trouncing Colorado in the Fiesta Bowl, finished number 2 in the country later that year. So I had an amazing experience in Eugene. But what are your thoughts as you come into the Big Ten, playing some of these teams, and what you guys think it's going to be like?
Man, to be honest, I don't know. But what I like hope for
Yeah.
um is everything, that points to the direction of why it all happened, right? And you look at Dan Lanning and his situation. I mean, he's actually probably got one of the best coaching jobs right now in college
Mhm,
football. Um,
mhm,
his team, the last 2 years in recruiting, they've knocked it out of the park.
mhm,
Last year they had a 1 5-star, but many 4-star recruits. And people can argue like, 5-star, 4-star, what's the big difference? Some guys don't really pan out, and that 5-star, you know, status. So the more 4 stars you have, the better chances of you actually finding a player.
mhm,
Um, so I guess, with Dan Lanning, the reason why he stays at Oregon is because of the opportunity at Big Ten.
mhm,
Um, if you can argue that Big Ten and SEC could be battling for the powerhouse conference next year. I mean,
mhm.
I might be stepping on toes right now saying that, but
No, you're
like
right.
because but I think right now the leverage, of adding, you know, the California schools, Oregon, to this whole mix, you're just adding value. And the team that has, instant success, which I feel like Oregon is more prepared for, in reference to the other schools, uh, just given this year and the success that they've had, the recruiting opportunity that they have right now for him staying at
Mhm.
Oregon. Um, I feel like they have an advantage right now to really, make a splash and grab some noise, which helps the recruiting. Uh, so I mean, the opportunity is just the sky's the limit, for all schools, and Big Ten is just going to continue to just expand and grow at large as far as exposure. Um, you're getting Pac-12 fans
Mhm.
watching the Big Ten now, and no other conference. You know what I'm saying? So the value there, you already have the media outlets, Chicago, um, one of the biggest media outlets in the nation. So it's just primed for success.
I agree with you completely because even before Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA joined, Big Ten schools were making about 8 to 9 million more dollars a year than the SEC schools. Now,
Yeah,
there's a lot of pluses to this. Okay, you got the coast to coast coverage, which obviously is going to skyrocket media deals and TV deals in the future. Now, I look at it from a recruiting perspective. The Big Ten has no ties to Florida,
hmm
Texas, California. Oh, wait, now we do. And now the Big Ten has a direct tie to California, not just with USC, UCLA, but now Ohio State. And you got Michigan and you got Nebraska and even Northwestern. And so I think that helps recruiting wise. I think it helps for exposure. And it's because obviously the SEC has got the South and they've got Texas and they've got Florida for their recruiting bases, plus the whole freaking South in general. And so I think the SEC is obviously a great conference. I think it's going to be more regional, obviously. And I think the broadness, literally, the Big Ten's a national conference now. I think
yeah,
that is the advantage the Big Ten has. And to your point about Dan Lanning, what he is building is phenomenal. You look at the recruiting class he already has this year, they're currently ranked sixth in the country. Okay.
yep,
You look at the past 5 years, they have three top 10 recruiting classes. And to your point, a lot of that, yeah, you got the 5 stars, but a lot of that is the number of 4 stars. okay? If you've
Mhm.
got 3 5 stars and maybe 3 4 stars versus another team who's maybe got 8 or 9 4 stars and maybe no 5 stars, I would take the more good players, so to speak. So I love
Mhm.
that you point all that out, and it makes a lot of sense. And for those who don't know, they're probably aware Dan Lanning was rumored to be in the conversation for the Bama job, and he took his name out and he's staying at Eugene because of what Oregon offers, because of what the Big Ten offers, because he's got a young team coming back next year. I think they're a top 5 team in the country next year. So I think he can make some big noise going forward in Eugene.
Yeah, man, and I mean, I think even, the quote that he gave, I think it was something on the lines of, "Your coach might have left, but I'm not leaving."
Mhm.
It's great.
Yep.
It's great. It's a
Mhm.
great recruiting tool, and
Absolutely.
phrase to use, as he closes out this recruiting, going leading up to signing day. So, kudos to him. I mean, everything that he's building at Oregon right now is everything that I've actually been wanting over the
Mhm.
last, 16 years, I guess, since I've left Oregon. But watching, the opportunities that we've had to play on national levels against, Tennessee, against Auburn, against, Georgia, these, teams that, are known for being almost professional football teams. You know what I'm saying? So,
Mhm.
um, the the ability that well, what he's added, is depth at physicality on the
Mhm.
defensive side of the ball. We have bigger guys now. I mean, you look at the UW Michigan game. UW has proven this year to be a physical team. Being able to push guys around, but they went and played Michigan and they got pushed around
Mhm.
because they
Yep.
weren't big enough. It's
Mhm.
just simply put, and they didn't have enough depth to take care of, what was in front of them. And so, I believe at the end of the day, like, the trenches matter. And I think that's where he's starting to really pull his recruiting card because he has the ties to Georgia. He has the ties to the South. And now that he's at the Big Ten level, it's going to be way much easier uh, to get those guys to commit because, hey, mom, you can just come up to, the Iowa game, or you can just come up to the Michigan game to watch me play. You don't have to come all the way to Oregon for a home game every time you want to watch me play.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think there's a great opportunity in the recruiting world for him to really make a splash. And that's why I say, the team that has instant success um, will see this thing as a grand opportunity for the long term.
I think you make a phenomenal point with the type of players that Oregon's recruiting under Coach Lanning. So again, I grew up in the Northwest, and so I don't mean this to be anything except what my opinion was. Could have been wrong or right. I always said Oregon was too fast, and that makes no
Mm,
sense to anybody. But I said they're too fast because they're too small. Okay,
yeah,
so when they would go play in Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and let's be clear, they beat Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl a couple years ago, so it's not like they
yeah,
haven't had success against big teams. But when they played teams with speed and size, that's when they would
yeah,
struggle. And that's what he is facing head on, or he's taking head on in his recruiting. He's addressing the
yeah.
trenches. He's playing better defense. He's bringing in guys with speed and size. So I think you make a phenomenal point. I'm sitting here looking at Oregon's schedule for next year. Now, before we dive into the conference schedule, something caught my eye. In fact, two things caught my eye in the non-conference. I'm gonna be honest with you. I hate these patsy cupcake ridiculous schedules, especially in the non-conference. But going forward, if I'm a Big Ten AD or I'm an SEC head coach, I want patsies and I want cupcakes because the conference schedule is murderer's row. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm looking at Oregon's non-conference. Okay, you got Idaho. I mean, okay, you got Boise State. That's not a
Yeah,
gimme, and that's
that's
a
not a
team that's going
gimme.
to want to beat you. And then, why in the world, as a college football fan, I love this. As an Oregon alum, looking from Oregon's perspective, why in the world are you guys still playing Oregon State when you don't have to before you get into the Big Ten conference? What are your thoughts on those two games?
Well, I mean, there's a rivalry there. It's a state of
Yeah.
Oregon, and so you have to respect the fans. I think at the end of the day, it's a good, hey, we're not here often anymore, but
Hmm.
we'll come by and give you guys a show. Uh, that's kind of how I look at that game.
I got you.
Um, and so it's I guess it's one of the longest standing rivalries of all time. And
Mhm.
so to just to cut that loose, it would be hard for a lot of people, especially out the gate. Maybe you might see it wither away, but we'll see.
So, I'm not rooting for or against Oregon. As a college football fan, I love it. If I were rooting for
Yeah,
Oregon, I'd be like, "I don't know about that. Maybe we schedule
yeah,
Idaho State before we take
yeah,
on,
yeah.
these Big Ten
Because
teams."
it's
Yeah.
a tough it's going to be a tough game.
Mhm.
But I wonder what's going to happen to Oregon State's recruiting. You know what
They
I'm
won't be
saying?
the
Like
same in a year or
they
2.
won't be this.
Yeah.
They won't be the
No.
same, right? There's going to be a lot of guys, picking up, moving on,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, they see opportunities elsewhere and money. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? So, um, I think at the end of the day, this has to be one of those stints where it's like, hey, this is our departure gift.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan Smith, who was there the last time Oregon State was a top 5 team in '01, who was the head coach. Now he's in East Lansing in Michigan, okay? DJ Ungululele, I've tried to s I apologize. DJ has transferred to Florida State. I have practiced that, and I apologize.
Yeah, that's
People
a
butcher
hard
my
name.
name all the time.
That's
He's a
that's a
Florida
hard name.
State. Head coach is gone, quarterback's gone, other people have transferred out, so they're not gonna be the same. I am glad they're keeping it around as a fan, okay?
Mhm.
Now, you look at the Big Ten schedule itself, all right? You got UCLA, Michigan State, Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Washington, okay? There's other teams on here, Purdue, Illinois, Maryland, all due respect, but that's like 5 to 6 to 7 big name programs that Oregon's gonna be playing. Exciting TV. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on this Big Ten slate for the Ducks next year?
It's very exciting. I mean, it's an opportunity to really see what you're up against,
Mhm.
to really see what level of football you're playing. This is the top of the tier. Uh, if you want to come to a school and get your chances to play professional ball and get a good measurement or a good baseline, this is where you want to be. To play teams like that on such a massive platform, it's what you dream of. It is absolutely what you dream of. You get to go play in LA. You get to go play in Michigan, Ohio. Like it's like I don't know what else word to say besides it's the cascade of football,
Mhm.
right?
For sure.
So like it's a great opportunity, man. If I were coming out of high school right now, I'm watching what's happening with those four schools adding to the Big Ten because those are schools that are going to absolutely need help. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And need help, you know, implementing a new play. At the end of the day, too, like what you're going to have to see is philosophies change. From these West Coast teams coming to the Big Ten.
Mhm.
Playing in different elements. You're going to have to run the ball probably a lot more and a lot more efficiently. Um, so if you're, a certain type of player that might not be able to play in the Big Ten, the original Big Ten, you should be a player that's looking to get in at Oregon, UCLA, USC, because yeah, it's a bit of a ways as far as where you're going to be going to school, but as far as your exposure to your family, to your dreams, this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, just looking at this schedule, so you're gonna be at Camp Randall in Madison, Wisconsin, mid-November. That's gonna be a little different climate. Then you just look at the level of competition. You got the 2 teams who are in the national championship game. You've got Michigan, you got Washington, then you got Ohio State, who's probably gonna be a top maybe not even top 5, top 3 team next year. Okay,
Yeah.
and here's something that I love because when
Well,
I went well,
I
go ahead.
will say, Washington's going to struggle a little bit next
They won't
year.
be the same, that's true. Neither will
Yeah,
Michigan.
because
They won't be as
yeah,
good.
yeah, Washington's losing probably all of their players.
Yeah, they won't be the
Like
same.
besides two or three as far as starters. In their coaching situation, Lord help them, right? So
Yep.
Michigan, on the other hand, Michigan will be okay, I feel like.
They'll
But
be good. They won't be quite as good. Of course, who knows? That's what's great about college
yeah,
football. JJ
yeah,
McCarthy declaring to the NFL, Jim Harbaugh maybe not coming
mm,
back, doesn't seem likely. That's gonna impact all that. But, I Sharon Moore is going to step right in if he's the next head coach of Michigan. He's got 2 top
Yeah,
10 wins versus Ohio State, versus Penn State. He won 6 games as a head coach last year. So
yeah,
they'll be just fine. It's more about who's next up after JJ McCarthy. Okay, and you look at Ohio State. Like Michigan's probably going to be a top 10 team. Who knows what to make of Washington? Ohio State. They are Buckeye fans are going to hate this. So feel free at Adam Carriker 94 on Twitter. Feel free to at me with your hate. Okay, I'll just hit the block button, no hesitation. Okay, but here's the deal. All right, Ohio State right now at this point in time reminds me of Michigan last year. Okay, a team that had a disappointing end to the season, but has, other than
hmm
Marvin Harrison Jr., has a bunch of guys coming back who are coming back with a purpose and a goal for next year. And look what Michigan did. Okay, Emeka Ibuka is coming back. You add Will Howard at the quarterback position, who's going to add a dual threat dynamic. Okay, Ohio State's got 8 returning starters on what was a top 2 defense in the country last year, coming back for this year. So
yeah.
to me, Ohio State's a national title contender. I'm going to ask you about this because I am well aware of and I know Washington may not be as good next year, but instead of ending the season with the Civil War every year versus Oregon State, Washington is not doing the Apple Cup anymore with I'm sorry, with Oregon State for you guys. Washington State in the Apple Cup
Washington
for
State with the
Washington.
Apple Cup. Yeah.
Yep. Now you guys, because I'm well aware of how much the Oregon Washington rivalry is very real. Now you guys are going to end the season Saturday, November 30th against Washington. What do you think of that rivalry game as a former Duck?
So that to me is the true rivalry, right?
Okay.
Oregon State
Yep.
is definitely it's like the battle of, battle within the
Mhm.
state, right? Um, but when it comes to them dogs, we don't mess with them dogs.
Yep. Yep.
We do not mess with them dogs. Um, the phrase "huck the Huskies."
Ah, there you go.
But but yeah, so I mean, this is great TV,
Mhm.
and if these teams can be competitive um, through this transition, the hype is there. Um, it's just I mean, it's just made for TV. It's gonna be
Mhm.
beautiful. And so as far as the rivalry goes, man, like people legitimately hate each other. Like Seattle and Eugene don't mix. They're like
Mhm.
basically the same as far as like political and all that politics, whatever,
Yep.
but they hate each other. If you're wearing purple and gold, don't you walk around, and vice versa.
So I gotta ask you this, okay? Um, I'm just gonna be real with you. I know it's a mutual rivalry. I think it's a little bit more 60-40 Oregon towards Washington than Washington towards Oregon based on my experience. Thoughts?
As far as the fans,
The rivalry, just in general, the fans. Like, I went to a practice, in the spring going into my senior year in Eugene when Mike
hmm
Bellotti was still there.
yeah,
Oregon people were already talking about the Washington game. I
oh
went to
yeah.
Washington's spring game that same year, beautiful Puget Sound. I don't remember that many Washington people talking about Oregon that year. I'm just saying,
Well,
man,
that's
I'm
the
just saying.
and you wanna know why? Because
Why? Why?
there's been so much change at the University of Washington that they don't know who the coach is. They don't know. There's a lot of fan weather,
Yeah, I
right?
get it.
Fair weather, whatever you
I
want to
get it.
call it.
Yeah.
That's what's going on up there. Um, you know, this year a lot of bandwagon, Huskies or dog pet owners, they joined the bandwagon. That's what happened this year. Um, and at the end of the day, too, you got to look at it from this point. Oregon, University of Oregon, and Oregon State for a very long time is all Oregon had. I mean,
Mhm.
Portland Trailblazers.
Yep.
As far as sports in Washington, you got the Seattle Mariners, you got the
You had
Sounders,
the
you had the
yeah,
Sonics at one point, you
for a while.
had
Yep.
you have Seahawks, you have
Yep.
Washington State, UW. So, and then you have all the Seattle basketball schools because, Portland and Seattle, believe it or not, because even though it's cold weather up there, it's a big basketball state. Um, so they might have too much on their plate to be so worried about, Oregon down there. So, you know, I will say though, whatever it is, there's a lot of hatred.
Oh, I get it, and I just wanted to poke a little bit just to see if it would come out, and I'm glad it came out, man. Don't worry. Nebraska, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Colorado, now Nebraska,
Yeah.
Iowa. Don't worry, we got the people
I
who
was
love us
talking to Nate
too, so
I was talking to Nate Robinson via Instagram one day
okay. Yep.
when when we were first about to play UW this year, and I'm glad we didn't really like make a official bet or anything. Nate Robinson obviously played basketball at
Mhm.
UW. Um,
Yep.
got he can bounce out of the gym still probably, uh, but I definitely do my chatter with a lot of UW graduates and
Mhm.
vets and whatnot. Shaq Thompson, he played for the Carolina Panthers, linebacker, still on the team right now. Definitely do my chatter with him. So it's fun, man, and that's what college is all about. That's what's different. That's the difference between pros and college. Is it means a lot more as far as a fan that has had an experience, with a particular college. If you've gone there, if you've grown up watching uh, a certain team and following a certain player, as we're talking about that, like I remember growing up, in 1999, Ron Dane,
Mhm.
Wisconsin, like that. That was my introduction to like what it was like to be a power running back. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
I think I was probably what, sixth grade, fifth grade. I don't know, I'm not sure, but but it was, like college just does something to you, especially if you're introduced to it at a certain age. Um, and it's like this development piece that if you're introduced to it, it's a special thing that you can carry for the rest of your life. So that having UW hatred, it's not so bad, to have a rivalry,
Mhm.
college or a mascot that you root against because it gives you something to look forward to.
For sure, and that's one of the things I love about college sports, and I fear that we're gonna miss in college football some of these rivalries gone by the wayside. Nebraska, Oklahoma, for example, that
Hmm.
rivalry's basically gone, and at one point in time, it was probably a top 3 rivalry in college football, along with Michigan, Ohio State, and whatever else you wanted to pick. We gotta wrap it up here. Couple final thoughts. So Nate Robinson actually played in the same state all-star game I did up in Washington. Okay,
Okay.
and I remember him before the game doing backflips in the end zone and just these ridiculous feats of athleticism. Ask him which team won that game. It was not his team, by the way. I was on the other side. But for those who don't know, Nate played in the NBA, 15-year vet, three-time slam dunk champion, insane hops. The only other thing I was going to throw out there, if you ever get a chance to go, and maybe Jonathan's done it, but for those watching, if you ever get a chance to go check out Winchester Bay, Florence, Coos Bay, Oregon, I used to go four-wheeling with my dad. We'd take a week every summer. Usually when I got to college, right before I'd go back when you did two-a-days, before we'd go to camp and do two-a-days, and we'd get up at 7, take a lunch, maybe an afternoon break for like 20 minutes. We'd ride 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for 7 days straight, never cover the same ground twice on our four-wheelers. Just awesome sand dunes. So I don't know if you ever did that, but for those who want
Yeah.
to try it out, definitely try it out. It's very, very cool.
Yeah. I've never been able to hit the sand dunes, but I've gone to Bandon Dunes to play golf in the wind, and that was terrible. My time at
Yep.
Oregon was not spent really going outside of Eugene. I was pretty focused, um, trying to make sure I didn't get in trouble.
I get it. And honestly, I about died 2 different times on the four-wheelers.
Oh
My coaches
no,
can now hear that, and it's okay. Obviously, I survived. So, anyways, I wanna thank you for joining me, my friend, and to all the people watching, this has been another Big Ten show. We'll catch you next time.
thank you. Go Ducks.